Why, hello there, old sports, and welcome to another Deltarune video. It's been a while since I've made one of these, I'm gonna be honest. Even before its first physical appearance in Chapter 3, many Deltarune fans have been speculating and theorizing about the Roaring Knight and its identity since its first mention in Chapter 1. As the main antagonist of Deltarune, or at least the current one, the Knight is very important to the story. Obviously. And considering this is the Undertale Deltarune fandom we're talking about, even the most minor of mysteries will be picked apart relentlessly, so one this big is going to of course have extra attention put upon it. The game is also definitely aware of this, considering that in Chapter 4, there's a moment where you can try to imagine the Knight. You will proceed to try to imagine the Knight taking its helmet off, but Chris will hijack this imagination session and will have Jockington be below the helmet. Considering they have access to the bunker and are shown very explicitly that they have some sort of working relationship with the Knight, it's a pretty safe bet to assume that Chris knows who's under that helmet, and therefore, they try to think of someone completely different to throw us off the trail. Hey, fun fact, I was gonna have a gag here about how Undertale fans can't read, and that there's probably inevitably going to be someone who assumes that Toby is being honest, and Jockington is the Knight. But after recent events, I have a gut feeling that Undertale fans have been reading a lot more. 262 pages to be exact. Anyways, as I was saying, even the game knows that this is a huge mystery that needs to be kept secret, at least for a little while longer. But it's always fun to speculate, and speculate the fandom has. And while there were many fun theories about the Knight and its identity before chapters 3 and 4, now that we've actually, seen it in person, physically, the candidates have gotten thinned out a lot. From Des to Carol to Rudy to Papyrus, each candidate more likely and reasonable than the last. There's just so many possibilities for who the Knight could be. But to finally get to the point of this video, I wanted to discuss something that I just came to a conclusion about, which I probably should have realized a lot sooner. That being, that the Knight is really weird. To be blunt, a problem with Deltarune theorizing is that half the fandom is playing things too safe and isn't really being creative and isn't trying to stray off some path that they've arbitrarily decided they need to walk. And then the other half is going so far off the path that you don't even know if they're talking about the same game anymore. To be more specific, a lot of Deltarune theories assume that things have to follow certain patterns that were laid out in the previous chapters, when that really just isn't the case. And I think the fandom got a lot better about this after chapters 3 and 4 came out, and really shook up what our expectations about what a chapter would entail. But regardless, habits are hard to break, and I understand why people fall into patterns. We are creatures of habit after all. In chapter 4, if Tenna is in your castle town, he'll even mention that no one wants to see a show that just does the same thing over and over as it gets progressively worse. And I think this is Toby kind of making a slight gag about how he doesn't want the story to be like that. So I think we need to realize that things can be different than our expectations. And I think one flaw of theorizing about an incomplete game is that there's elements of the story that just haven't been introduced yet. So then the other side of the fandom tries to take these wild swings to see if they'll hit the mark on something that's going to appear in a future chapter by just guessing things that haven't been introduced yet. And when I say guessing, they are using some evidence, it's just not the best, strongest evidence, they're doing a lot of assuming, and that's how you get things like Oberon Smog, which even if that was incorrect, the idea that Gerson was a Darkner reanimated by the dust on his hammer, honestly that was completely spot on, so good for Jaru for figuring that out. But you could also argue that with so many people in this fandom making theories, of course a couple of them are going to end up being correct, and then there's plenty of them that end up not being correct, or not even somewhat correct. And to tie this all back into the Roaring Knight, I think we have to understand that so far the game has gone out of its way to paint the Knight as a very strange, odd little creature, almost an anomaly of sorts. People assume the Knight is a Lightner, yet it seems to have abilities in the Dark World that no other Lightner possesses, not even the prophesized heroes of legend. The Knight appears to have very great control over its shape and form in the Dark World, almost moving like water. On top of that, it also shares a laugh with the mysterious friend entity that we've gotten hints at so far in the story. Though, to be completely transparent, that could be a situation like Flowey and Muffet sharing a laugh, where it's just a same sound effect being shared and being played at different pitches and speeds, so that could mean nothing. So, since the Knight seems to be so different from any other Lightner in the Dark Worlds we see, some assume that it's a Darkner. Yet, it seems to be able to run across town, holding Undyne into the bunker at the end of Chapter 3. So the problem I guess I'm trying to point towards here is that the Knight just doesn't really follow any of the rules that have been established. The Knight really doesn't seem to follow the rules of how a Lightner or a Darkner should work. They seem to be some sort of in-between entity. If anything, they seem a lot closer to the Titans in the Titan spawn. To their general shadowy appearance and their general strength, they resemble the Titans in their spawn quite a bit. But then again, this idea also has problems because, to our knowledge, Titans can't exist outside the Dark World. The only reason they can supposedly lay waste to the Light World is because during the Roaring, the Dark Worlds and Light Worlds would be overlapping so much that the barrier between them would be vague at best. Keeping that in mind, I don't think we can really understand exactly what the Knight is at this point in the story. I know a lot of people like to bring up that, like, oh, well, this thing, it would be weird to introduce these elements this late into a story, or this thing at this point in a story. But looking at Toby's previous work, Undertale, lots of things were introduced in the endgame, and that isn't really new to storytelling. So, and again, here I am following patterns, but looking at the author's previous works, it's not out of the possibility is what I'm trying to get at. It's not confirmed that he's going to follow this pattern, but it's not something we should just ignore or toss away as a possibility. Now, obviously, I'm aware this is not a new thought, and many people, including those who have made their theories about the Knight, have already come to these conclusions independently, but I think something important to point out is that in the way that YouTubers make videos, including myself, you kind of have to play things straight to a certain extent. You have to be confident, or else your video is going to suffer for it, and regardless of how strong your conclusions are, if you're charismatic enough and convincing enough, people will just listen to you because they see you as an authority because you're a YouTuber, for some reason. So I guess my point is just that it's okay that we don't know everything yet in the story, and obviously that doesn't mean we should stop making theories, because part of the appeal of this kind of story release is that we get to spend so much time theorizing and thinking about things. But as I've mentioned in previous videos, we can't let ourselves get too attached to our own ideas about certain theories, because when new information we couldn't have accounted for inevitably gets brought into play, that can really do a damage to our understanding of the story, and sometimes in an attempt to hold on to old theories, will not use new evidence to its fullest extent, and that can also cause problems. With that being said, I'd like to share some of my ideas about what the Knight could be, and when I say that, I want to state that I'm not claiming that I've solved the Roaring Knight, I just want to throw out some possibilities that have been stewing around in my head for a while. So, I don't sound like a complete hypocrite when I talk about this stuff, I just wanted to preface that. Anyways, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Now, I know people get all uppity whenever you bring up W.D. Gaster in Deltarune discussions, but, like, come on, he's going to be important eventually. And before someone brings up the idea that Gaster would be hard to fit into the story at this point, in Undertale, Flowey shows up for like a minute and a half at the beginning of the game, disappears until the ending, and then basically steals the show for the rest of the game. I could definitely see Toby trying to do something like that with Gaster, especially considering how Flowey and Gaster are both supposed to be the meta-knowledge, fourth-wall-breaking characters. I'd like to bring up that I think it's interesting that our antagonist's title is The Roaring Knight. Now yes, that could just be a play on night, sounds like night, as in darkness, but I think Toby is trying to do a double meaning here, and a knight is usually subservient to someone, or they are appointed by someone else, usually someone of a higher stature like a king or a pope. And considering the fact that the knight seems to be hiding out in the bunker that has a lot of weird ties to Gaster, I wouldn't be surprised if Gaster is the knight's superior. I wouldn't be surprised if Gaster is using the knight as their errand boy, if anything. I also think it's interesting that the knight has so many ties to December. when there should be no reasonable way for December to end up as this weird, broken, shadowy creature. At least by herself. I feel like some other second entity, whether that be Gaster, Friend, or some third unintroduced character, has to have some involvement with her transformation into the Knight, if she even is the Knight. And there lies my problem with so many candidates for who the Knight could be, at least with our current understanding. With people like Carol or Rudy, we know what they look like in the light world, and like I said, the Knight in the dark world is very odd and seems to be able to break and bend its body in whatever way it wishes to, which is an ability no Lightner possesses, which seems to imply it isn't a Lightner. I feel like the only reason that Des is such an appealing candidate for the Knight is because there's so many mysteries surrounding her, and there was that odd disappearance that she had, and she might be the voice in the unused code. And I feel like lots of our candidates for the Knight just comes down to who has the least amount of problems. And with a character like Des, who's very clearly being hidden for something, it makes sense that it's easier to assign her the role of the Knight, because there's not really many things that can disprove her standing as the Knight. And coming back around to Gaster, I think the reason so many people like to bring him up when discussing the Knight and its identity is because we don't know things about the Knight, and we don't know things about Gaster. They might be connected. After all, Gaster is one of, if not the ultimate mystery of Deltarune, at least on a meta level. I hear a lot of people talk about how for more casual players, it would be kind of weird if the whole Gaster thing and friend stuff just decided to like interrupt the story, for lack of a better term, or if the Gaster and friend stuff had too much importance in the narrative because it would confuse newer players or players that are unfamiliar. But honestly, I feel like it'd be a bit more of a slap in the face to the people who've been following this fandom for 10 years if we never got an answer to any of that stuff. Honestly, I feel like it'd be kind of okay if people were allowed to just be confused at some of this stuff if it was done well, and then they could go back and learn about this stuff, because sometimes you're not going to understand everything about a game the first time you play it, and I feel like it's fine if some of this like Gaster stuff was kind of not shoehorned in, but if it was written well, I feel like it'd be fine if it confused some players, because it's kind of meant to be something that's been hiding in the background waiting for its perfect chance for everything to come into fruition. And while Toby isn't the best writer in the world or anything, I think some people need to have some faith that he can write a good story, because he's been writing a good one so far. Why would he stop now? And yes, obviously I am aware landing and ending can be harder than just starting and continuing a story. My grand point here is that I feel like there's enough pointing towards Gaster being important in the story, and we already know the Knight is important to the story, so I feel like it's not too much of a stretch to assume they're connected in some way. Whether that be a working relationship, if Gaster created the Knight somehow, like he took Des's soul or body and like combined it with a Titan spawn or something silly. I feel like there's plenty of opportunities for where this could go, and I feel like we just need to keep somewhat of an open mind on letting the story continue. But again, like I said, I don't want to try to solve the Roaring Knight, because that cannot be done right now. I just want people to think about things and just give some more off-the-wall ideas a bit more thought, and just let these thoughts develop in your head. And if they're not correct, that's okay, because at least we're having fun theorizing. We don't need to make this not fun, because it's okay to be wrong about things. It's okay to just have a theory and not have it end up being true. That doesn't mean the time you put into that theory was wasted, because you enjoyed it during the time you were thinking about it. So I guess I'm just trying to say is that we can have fun theorizing, but don't get too attached, because things could change on a moment's notice with this series. Well, I think I've shared all the thoughts I want to for now. I worry that that last part of the script was a bit messy, and when I was rewriting it, I hope that none of the, or at least a minimal amount of the unfocused parts bled it back in, but I guess we'll see. Anyways, I guess like I said at the end of that last section, my whole point here is that I just want people to be more open to some of the more wild theories, while also not taking them as gospel. Just have fun theorizing. We are lucky to get to experience Deltarune as it's being made, and I feel like that's a really cool thing we're all part of. But we also just need to make sure that we don't let our idea of what we want the story to be eclipse what the actual story is. So we need to just let the story exist when it does come out and it is shared with us. But hey, what do I know? If you liked this video, please consider commenting, and subscribing so I have information, I guess, so I know I should make more Deltarune videos. If you didn't like this video, you're probably not watching it at all right now anyway, so I don't know why I'm talking. Before I go, I'd like to thank my 2 patrons, Sven Biscuit and Iconic Cat, for their continued support. It means the world to me. And I guess with that, I've said all I wanted to say for now. Have a good day, I hope you liked the video, and I hope it made your day a little bit better. If it didn't, I'm sorry. Try to have a good day if you can. Or whatever time of day it is for you. I'm rambling too much. Okay, bye, good night, see you on the flip side, all the outro stuff.